Hello, everybody. Hello. Glad to be back with you on another part of our virtual tour. We are basically launching part two. We've visited 10 different sites in the country so far. And now we are starting the second part with another 10 lectures or 10 sessions to take you to places that some of them are definitely off the beaten path. Most people do not go there. Places like Beersheba, places like Arad, some of the others. But session number one for today, we're going to go to the most famous place in the country, second only to Jerusalem, no doubt, and to our national site, a place called Masada. Masada means basically a fortress. That's what it means literally. But of course, there is a big story behind Masada. We're going to enjoy the beauty of the desert. We're going to speak about the days of King Herod, one of the greatest kings that ruled over Judea, and some will say one of the greatest builders in human history. And we're going to speak about a place that was built by him. It was built as a palace, as a fortress, a place of refuge. But most of the story that Masada is known for took place about a century later. That was the last stronghold of the Jewish zealots. Not all these zealots. There was a subgroup called the Sicaries, more militant even than the zealots. They were those that fortified themselves in Masada. And this is why Masada is famous for today, the last stronghold of the Jews. They decided to take their own lives and not to go to Roman captivity. So we're going to enjoy the beauty of the desert. I hope that you're going to enjoy the historical story behind as well. And the way to present Masada will be to speak about the site first, and then to go forward another 100 years or so, and to speak about the zealots in Masada. I'm not going to speak about the Roman-Jewish wars. This is something which is too big to be covered in two sentences. So we'll only take this isolated incident that was the opening episode and the closing episode of the Jewish-Roman wars, and that's what we're going to speak about. As always, I'm going to use the presentation. I do have some video segments for you as well. I know that the Zoom is not working perfectly well. Maybe it's my problem, I don't know. But you get a message. You get a message, and please bear with me if it will take me a while to get the technology up. Sometimes it does take a while. So let's see if we can carry on and start right away. Well, here is the opening slide that you know so well by now. That's how we start every session in the seminars. And this is always the picture of the Judean wilderness, the mountains overlooking the Jordan Valley. Well, today we're going to the wilderness because Masada is located on the shores of the Dead Sea. We'll speak about the location and we'll add some about the beauty of the place, etc. Well, number one, we'll speak about the time frame. We'll speak about Masada. We'll speak about the Roman Empire's era. We'll speak about a man by the name of Herod. I'm going to dedicate the whole seminar just about King Herod the Great because he was a key player in the region. Keep in mind, we'll speak about the days of Jesus as well. And therefore, knowing King Herod and his kingdom is very beneficial to people that want to know more about Judea in the days of Jesus, but this is not a topic for today. So we're going to speak about the Roman occupation of Judea. We're going to speak about Masada, and I think that all of you know that view of the fortress as we are approaching with the buses. We always come from the eastern side. So this is a view of Masada from the eastern side. There's another axis on the other side coming along the Roman ramp that very seldom groups and people are taking. Most of the groups that I'm guiding in Masada and most of the groups will take the cable car to go up and down. So that will be the view that we see from a distance as we're getting closer to Masada. By the way, and this is not easy to understand, but the very top of Masada is about 100 feet above sea level. Now, when you're coming close, when you see how high is the cliff above you, sometimes people forget that you are looking at the cliff from a place which is about 1,300 feet below sea level, and therefore the mighty cliff in front of you, the top of it, is about 100 feet above sea level, which is quite amazing, just to try to grab the whole idea, or to understand the whole idea of sea level above and below. Well, let's speak about the minor stories that we're going to share. Number one, we'll speak about Masada as a palace, as a fortress built by King Herod the Great. What were the reasons and why this location? We're going to speak about the Jewish zealots about 100 years after the construction of Masada, why they started their revolt against Rome in that specific location, and how come that became to be the last stronghold. The Zealots did not add much to what was built on Masada, except for a few places that they needed as a Jewish community that Masada was lacking. For example, a cleansing facility and a synagogue. And a fort was built by a king that ruled Roman style. You will not have such facilities, and therefore the zealots made small changes, not much, to Masada. So most of it is still standing there from the days of King Herod the Great. We're going to speak about the Roman siege system, which is the most complete system in the world. When you lay siege around the place in Europe and you build everything out of timber, timber will not survive for too long in such a wet climate as Europe is. But if you make everything from stone, and there's no other option in the area of Masada, in a place that nobody goes down there unless you have a real reason to, nobody is going to reuse the stones to build homes in communities. There's nothing around. And therefore, the stones are still there, and the siege system is still almost complete and almost intact, which makes it quite a unique place in world history. We're going to speak about the excavation, but very briefly. That's not the main part of the story. But excavating Masada was more than just an archaeological dig. It was also to have a lot of PR for the state of Israel. And in the excavations, teams of volunteers were coming from all around the world. And the plan was they're going to excavate, and while excavating, they're going to share the story of the revival of the nation, of the regathering of the nation, and you will be ambassadors of goodwill for Israel going back home. So Masada was excavated in about 2 consecutive years with thousands of people participating, and each one, I hope, was indeed an ambassador of goodwill when they went back home. But the most important part, to me at least, to share with you, will be the symbolism, what Masada stands for. Every nation, or most nations, have a national side that represents their zeal, their passion, the way they see themselves vis-a-vis their country. In the case of Israel is Masada. You have the Alamo, and we have Masada with some differences, of course. And we're going to speak about why Masada is so symbolic and so important for the state of Israel in a more national manner, more than a religious one. So these will be the things that we're going to touch on. And we'll do that briefly because the time is short. And we start with another map. Here is the map of the region back then. It's very important to note that Judea, this area, was very close to the border of 2 mighty empires, Rome on one side and Persia on the other side. The Bible doesn't tell us much about what happened in the country back in the days of Jesus, talking about politics or speaking about the 2 empires colliding. There was always some tension along the border between the two. And Persia is not well taught in Western schools, so to speak. We focus on the Roman Empire for a good reason. But Persia was as big as Rome, and sometimes even stronger than the Roman army. And we speak about centuries of conflict. Sometimes the Romans had the upper hand. Sometimes the Persians had the upper hand. But to have a kingdom of Jews that were not loyal to Rome, right on the Roman-Persian border, that was a headache for the Roman authorities. And for that reason, appointing somebody like Herod to deliver and to make sure that he is protecting and representing Roman interests, that was part of the Roman diplomacy, to appoint a client king that was very pro-Roman and try very hard to inject, if you wish, Roman principles into the heart of his own subjects. And that was a partial success because many people did follow the Roman way of life. But you do understand that you're right on the border, and in order to invade Rome's territory, Judea will hold the front line. And for that reason, Rome needed allies in this location. For that reason, Herod was selected by them to be the king of Judea. Some key locations: Caesarea, which is on the Mediterranean shores, Tiberias up in Galilee, Beit Shan, one of the largest cities. Interesting, was never in Herod's hands. So the Romans were very picky what area to give to Herod and what not. Beit Shan was not in the kingdom of Herod. It was part of the Decapolis that we mentioned some other time. And down along the shores of the Dead Sea will be Masada and Gedi, and of course the capital, which will be Jerusalem. So this is just to set the scene, to remind you how the map looks like. Let's zoom in to the map by the Dead Sea. And once again, you see the key locations. That's Masada. Well, this picture was taken about 15 or 20 years ago, and you see there is a land bridge that's processed to the other side. In the previous one, which is a little older, you do see there is no connection here. There's no land bridge. Well, scholars do believe that the land of Israel 2,000 years ago, and of course the area of the Dead Sea, is very similar to what it is now. Many people lived in the country back then, and the more people live in Judea, more water is needed, and water was taken from the River Jordan, which means less of the Jordan feeds into the Dead Sea, the shallow parts surface, and creating a land bridge that connects both sides of the lake, which means that anybody can cross on dry land here, which made this location critical for the safety of the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Back to King Herod for just a minute, a man that was ruling Roman style. Jerusalem was not his comfort zone. Jerusalem was always the center of Jewish national sentiments, and the Jews would not cooperate, especially in Jerusalem. The Jewish aristocracy may will, but the majority of the people were very anti-Roman, and therefore you can easily lose control in your own capital. And if that happens and you're trapped in Jerusalem, you have to have some places of refuge nearby that you can flee to if in case of things are going out of control in Jerusalem, especially in the Jewish holidays. Think about Passover. The reason for the celebration of Passover is the Jews are celebrating their political freedom. Going out of Egypt and having the political freedom, think about a nation occupied by Rome, celebrating the political freedom. That will be a formula to a lot of bloodshed, unrest, and chaos in Jerusalem. Indeed it was. And therefore Herod needed places of refuge in the desert if something goes out of control in Jerusalem. The problem is you have to present your case to Caesar, because the Roman emperor will not support a king that will appeal to him and say, well, sir, I'm not strong enough in my own capital. I'm not controlling things. I need to build places of refuge for my family. That's the wrong way to present your case to Caesar. The main source of information about the whole era is coming from the book of Josephus Flavius, a Jewish historian. It started his career as a leader of Galilee in the war against Rome. Then they captured him, appointed him to be the Jewish historian of the Jewish-Roman wars, and he was the one that provides excellent explanations, excellent data. He was attending Roman staff meetings, so we have an eyewitness to most of what happened. And Josephus tells us that Herod appealed to Caesar Augustus and said the following: "Sir, you made me a king, you gave me a kingdom. My kingdom occupies a section of Rome's eastern border. Let me help, not for my sake, for Rome's sake. Give me permission to build fortresses in the desert, because without asking permission, it's an act of rebellion." Permission was given. Herod built 7 fortresses in the desert, and Masada was the largest one, and the one that was the furthest away from Jerusalem on the shores of the Dead Sea. So the place was built, and the mountaintop was selected very carefully because it's overlooking this land bridge. Other places in the area would qualify to be fortresses, but this mountain is so isolated and you cannot climb it because there are cliffs from 4 sides basically, and getting up to the top is almost impossible. And of course, the fact that it's overlooking this land bridge, which was always a vulnerable area, a potential invasion route into Rome's territory, that would be the reason to choose that location. And of course, the whole motivation to build fortresses in the desert. Construction started around 35 BC. I do not know how long did it take. Josephus doesn't tell us. It all depends on how many resources that you have. There was no shortage of that. And how many people you have as a building force to build the place, because the challenges to build such a place were quite enormous. Number one, we speak about the desert, and desert doesn't have any water in it. So when you start building and you're surviving in such an area, you always have to consider the water issue. And the Romans dedicated quite some efforts to build a system over there to carry water from the mountains, but no challenge was too big for the Romans. We speak about master water engineers. They knew what they were doing. Of course, you're away from any community, so you have to make sure that you have everything that you need with you, because you're basically totally disconnected with any community in the area. The closest one was in Gedi, some 10 miles away. But again, for the Roman fortress, that was not any kind of interaction between the two. So you're quite away from the center of the country. No nearby water sources, as we mentioned. The closest one was indeed in Gedi, that's about 10 miles away. And you had to have your water reservoirs ready and to know how to catch the rain floods and how to catch the groundwater in the due season to carry it from the mountains around you to through 2 or 3 canals and to fill up the water systems. And that's how you survive in the desert, basically. Food and other provisions were always a challenge. You have to bring that from far away. Well, since we speak about the royal estate, that was not a problem. All you have to do as a king back at the time is to give the order. And your people are going to carry good food from anywhere, store it in the storehouses in Masada. And of course, it's so dry and hot over there that it can last for a long time. And that was a way to do that. Josephus Flavius tells us there was a market garden in Masada. If you bring some rich soil, and the mountains are not that far away, and dump it in the center of it, you can have fresh vegetables on your breakfast table every day. And Josephus does mention that. We speak about building material. Everything was made of the local limestone, a tough one called dolomite. So the stones were quarried on top of Masada. What they had to bring from far away was plaster. Everything was beautifully plastered and painted and frescoed, and mosaics as well. These were prepared either in Jerusalem and carried to Masada, or maybe they were done in Masada. We don't really know where the mosaics were prepared. But of course, when we speak about the blocks of stone, everything was carved out in Masada, and plaster had to be brought, usually blocks of limestone, very soft, called chalk, and they used to prepare those on the side. Or sometimes they used to prepare the plaster in the quarry area and carry the final product anywhere in the country, in this case, Masada. And of course, reaching the top is very, very challenging. There are two main roads up to the top, and they used to be in the past as well. One is coming from east, called the snake path, very hard to climb, not because of the many snakes that live along the path. It looks like a snake, it snakes up the top of the mountain. And the other one, the main entrance, was coming from west, but most of it is buried today under the Roman siege ramp. Let's look at Masada and see how the site used to look like. This is an earlier view, obviously, of the site. It's a large oval mountaintop, about 700 meters or so from north to south, and about 300 meters from east to west. Most of it was not covered by structures. In the central area, that was the market garden, the depression. Everything was surrounded by a wall. Now, you do understand, it has to be a question here. The cliffs are so steep and so high, why would you build a wall on top? Not for protection. If anybody is climbing the cliff, cannot they climb another 10 feet of the wall? Well, it wasn't that much to protect the fortress. It was part of the Roman standards. When you build a fortress anywhere, you have to surround it by a wall. That's how the Romans did things. And in Masada, it's absolutely amazing to see that on top of a cliff, which is impossible to climb, they still insisted to build a wall. And this wall was made of two walls that were going parallel to each other, divided by inner walls to many rooms. When the Zealots occupied the place, these were the living quarters for the Zealots. They did not come there to enjoy the beauty of the desert or to enjoy the bathhouse. They came for a reason. They added some facilities, but most of them lived literally in the walls. That's where all of their belongings were found. There were two palaces. We call this one today the Western Palace. That was the center of administration and looks like the reception room of King Herod himself. By the way, there's no record that Herod himself ever visited Masada. We don't know that for sure. We know the place was built by him, but we don't have any circle record that Herod had to leave Jerusalem in haste because of some riots and made his way to Masada. So there was a garrison that occupied the area. But the main entrance, the main gate, was on the western side. So you do have the crown room, the reception room, and the main palace on the western side. You do have, of course, the storehouses, which were here. And without that, you will not survive. 14 storehouses altogether. There was a spa, a very nice one, a sauna basically, and the bathhouse. And there was the northern palace as well, a magnificent structure that was made of 3 platforms, one above the other. So these were the main structures and the main complexes in Masada. The main water cistern was on the very top, and this one had to be filled with water all the time because the others were outside the walls. And if your fortress comes under siege, you don't have access to the other water cisterns. So they had to carry water, yes, with buckets from the lower cisterns up to the very top in order to make sure that the cisterns are always full of water. Let me try to bring up one of those videos and see how that works and try to share with you some of the water issue and how it was solved. And I hope it's going to work well without any problem. So give me just a minute. We'll try to arrange that and see how it works. For some reason, bringing up those is a little challenging. That should work. And I hope that you'll be able to see at least part of it and get to the idea. Rains in the area, maybe 5 or 6 days a year,
but the local soil is made of clay. And when it falls in the desert, it doesn't go through the ground. It becomes to be basically flood water or groundwater. And all you have to do, if you know how, is to channel the flash floods into one central canal and carry it into the cistern. That's what happened on the other side. This one, you can see that drainage canal, all genuine, 2,000 years old. And this one collected water from the rain that fell on top of Masada. The central part of Masada has a big depression. That depression basically will channel all the water from the hillsides, will go to one central canal, and will flow down this way into the cistern that you're about to see. Now, this is the smallest of the 8 cisterns that were found in this area, and therefore just an example of how well was the place prepared for a long siege if necessary. When the whole system was full of water, capacity would be something like 40,000 cubic meters, more than enough to sustain a small community. You do see the plaster on the walls, and that's your indication. This place was built not as a grain storage, but for water. You see how narrow is the entrance. You want to keep it dark as possible and not out in the sunlight, so it won't have any algae on it or any kind of thing will fall into it.
Okay, I hope that the technology was not that bad and you're able to follow at least part of what I tried to show you. Let's go back now to the presentation. We stopped someplace around here. Okay, so we're going back to the sketch of Masada, and let's carry on to describe the fortress as we zoom into these places. 8 cisterns were dug by Herod's engineers, 6 on the western side of Masada. These were dug in an angle, which means you could not see them from the bottom. When the Roman army arrived, they did not know about those cisterns full of water so close to them, and they had to be camouflaged. So 6 on the western side, 1 on the eastern side. You just saw the one on the eastern side in the movie, and 1 was on the very top. And when the cistern was full of water, 40,000 cubits, that's a lot. That's a lot. And it's really hard to see that. I only saw it for the first time about a year ago. I was in Masada with a group, and rain fell on the mountains of Hebron, and you saw the floods coming. And this was absolutely amazing. In a very short time, all the ravines in the area carried a huge amount of water, waterfalls falling off the cliffs into the Dead Sea, absolutely amazing. Now think about collecting that amount of water on the mountaintops and channel it to one central water reservoir, and with a canal from that reservoir to fill up those cisterns. Now I cannot only tell you the story, I know it's doable because I've seen it with my very eyes. So that was really an aha moment to understand how it was done back then. That was quite a rare opportunity. On the very top of Masada, some key sites and locations. That's how the land bridge looks like today. Till about 20, 25 years ago, there was no land bridge here. The water was higher and everything was underwater. But since the state of Israel is using a lot of water from the River Jordan, it affects and impacts the Dead Sea immediately. The level of water is going lower and lower, which means that the shallow parts are surfacing. There is a land bridge today, and most scholars do believe that that was the same case 2,000 years ago. That was the reason to choose that location to build a fortress. The storehouses, 14 storehouses altogether. When they did the excavations of them, they found a countless number of seeds of fruits. Every fruit tree that grows in the country. So dry fruits, of course, can live for a long time, can survive for a long time. And that's how the storehouses were started with. They even tried to germinate one of the date seeds, and that was a partial success because one did germinate. The problem was that they were germinating a seed of a male tree, and male trees do not produce dates, keep in mind. So we'll have to keep trying. We really want to know what kind of dates were there in Israel back at the time, because the dates of today in Israel is exported #1 in the world in dates, 40,000 tons of dates every year to Europe. These dates we brought to Israel from the banks of the Euphrates River about 70 years ago. So these are Iraqi majhul dates. We do not know exactly how the dates in Judea used to look like. Give us some time. We keep trying and we'll find the answer. So there is a date palm tree, not date palm tree, that grows in an orchard in Israel, which is 2,000 years old. Technically, the seed is 2,000 years old. Let's have a word about the bathhouse, and that was a must facility in every Roman town. That was absolutely essential, part of the Roman culture. It doesn't make much sense, I'll be quick to admit, that if you live in a place that has an annual temperature, well, 8 months out of the year, temperature is more than 110 degrees, why would you even consider to go to a sauna? It's so hot outside. Well, the question is irrelevant. You cannot call yourself a Roman unless going to the bathhouse is part of your daily life. And visiting the bathhouse was more than just getting clean. It wasn't a spa, it wasn't a pool, it was a steam room basically. And that was a place to socialize. That was a place of political intrigues as well. And that was a place that they believed is simply good for your body because the more you sweat, it will improve your blood circulation. It will clean some of the, let's call it poison from your body. So there were reasons why to go to a bathhouse, but it wasn't even an option. If you're a Roman, that will be part of your schedule, regardless how hot it is outside or how cold it is. You always have a bathhouse around. The Wadi Masada was not that big because only a small garrison was occupying the mountain, but it has all the rooms and all the system working as it should. Number one, there was a furnace, and the furnace was outside, and they had to fuel the fire, so they had to have enough timber over there. Or sometimes, I'm sorry for being gross, but camel manure will do the job as well if you know how to process it. And this furnace had two compartments. The fire and the burning material was down below, and as the hot air was going up through, well, there was no chimney, but into the upper compartment, a big bellow was attached to that, and they used to bellow the hot air under the floor into the bathhouse. That was the floor. This is all new, I have to say. These columns basically were supporting the floor, and the heat came from under. It was boiling, and every now and then somebody will come to pour some water on the floor to make steam. That's how the system worked. And you're spending most of your time in the hot room, the caldarium, but there was a cold room as well to go and refresh every now and then. There was a tepid room, so you're not going from freezing cold on one side. It wasn't really freezing cold, but when it's 110 degrees outside, even room temperature will be freezing cold. You go from the frigidarium to the tepidarium and then to the caldarium. You see the plaster, which is, well, part of it is genuine, but those clay pipes are not. There was a team from Italy that did that about 15 years ago. So this is just to give an idea how the heat was coming from the floor and from the walls as well. So that would be a bathhouse. And the only thing that the zealots added to Masada in this area would be a small water container that would be a mikveh for them to be able to have a place for ritual cleansing. And that was the thing that was added by the zealots. Let me just show you the beauty of Masada and how much attention was dedicated to build the place. You see the mosaics? You will not see anything that indicates pagan worship here. There'll be no images. Herod was not, well, I should not say that. Herod was the king of the Jews and tried to keep the Jewish laws, but not very strictly. But he was entertaining, and some of his officials were Jewish. So not to offend them and not to hurt their feelings, he was very, very careful. In places that were Jewish centers, not to have any sign for idol worship and not to draw any kind of images. So in the palaces in Judea and Jerusalem, only nice geometrical shapes, all kind of fruits, flowers, whatever, but no images. You do see how the walls were painted. They were plastered and painted. This is very typical Roman. If you've been to Roman places in Europe and Northern Africa, that's usually what you see. The combination of this one is called Pompeii, red and green. Very seldom you see yellow or blue. These are much more common. And look down here, the beautiful quality of plastering. It looks like pieces of marble, but they are not. Everything was plastered like that inside Masada. Some of it was painted, but outside, everything was plastered. And you will see, 2,000 years later, it's still in great quality. You have to admire those Roman engineers. By the way, we speak about Jewish engineers that carried out the project, but they were exposed to Roman technology. Rome was more than happy to share its skills and technology to every corner of the empire, including Herod's people. They were sent to Rome, no doubt, to learn how to become such great builders. And this was done by experts and not by just workers that did not know what to do. These were not slaves. We speak about professional personnel that was building it. Herod had a division of 10,000 people that he was always employing in construction, the whole temple, for example, the harbor in Caesarea, and Masada was part of that idea as well. Even the northern palace of Masada, this is a view from the west. You see the Roman siege ramp and the Dead Sea, which is behind. And if you zoom in, that's how it used to look like. Well, this is, of course, a recreation to show you the three platforms and how beautiful they look like. This is the bottom platform, and some of the frescoes are original. These were redone recently. Just to give you a more vivid picture of the beauty of the place, that would be not the official palace to welcome guests. That will be the main palace, however, and that was also separated from the rest of the side by its own wall. So that will be the stronghold inside the stronghold, and that will be the dungeon, if you wish, of Masada, what we call the Northern Palace. 3 terraces. The one in the center was not large enough to accommodate a real terrace, so Herod's engineers were erecting retaining walls from the bottom just to enlarge the central platform, so it will be large enough to accommodate the central platform. That's how the Northern Palace used to look like. Well, let's take it another step, and we'll speak about the Jewish-Roman War. So far, I just gave you a description of how Masada used to look like. Let's move on to the next stage. Well, the Jewish wars against Rome started officially. The spark was in Caesarea, but the first act of war was when a group of those Sycari zealots from Galilee occupied Masada. That was in 66 AD, and that will be the trigger that will lead the whole nation to a big war and terrible disaster, we have to say. We do not know all the details. We have no idea how the place was taken by the zealots. No doubt they maybe tricked the Roman garrison. Maybe the garrison was out patrolling and it was taken by surprise. We do not have the details. But why start in Masada makes a lot of sense. The place was so well equipped with food and ammunition and body armors, 10,000 body armors from Herod's days. Now we're now 100 years after the days of Herod. If you want to go to war against Rome, that's what the largest arsenal outside Jerusalem, that's where you start your war. So they took everything from the storehouses and moved it to Jerusalem. It was lost in Jerusalem during the Roman siege around the city. They added a few facilities to Masada. We spoke about the mikveh, the cleansing facility, and they made one of the rooms in the wall, the one that was facing Jerusalem, into a synagogue, a place of the public gatherings. But the families and everybody else lived in the walls. That will be now the dwelling places for the zealots, and that's where most of their belongings were found. They found jewelry, they found women's hair. When Jewish women mourn, one of the gestures of mourning is cut off your hair. They found sandals in very good condition. It's so dry over there. Everything will last for a long time, and quite a lot of coinage as well. So when we speak about Masada, we speak about the zealots. And since the places were devastated by the Roman army up in Galilee, many people joined them. So it was occupied by the zealots first. Most of them went back to Jerusalem to participate in the war against Rome. But those that were losing their communities in Galilee, some, decided to flee to Masada. And when Jerusalem was under siege, one of the zealot leaders in Jerusalem, a man by the name of Elazar, son of Yair, left Jerusalem and went down to Masada, and the locals made him their commander. Josephus tells us that up in Masada, when the Roman army arrived, there were 960 men, women, and children. We also know from Josephus that 5 children and 2 women did not die in what happened in Masada, and he heard the story from them. He was not in the country by the time the Roman army was leaving Jerusalem to go and lay siege around Masada. So he was not an eyewitness to Masada's story. He was an eyewitness to the rest of the war. But Masada took place about 2 years later. He was in Rome by then. Well, without going into many details, after 4 years of fighting the Roman army in different places around the country, and Rome invested a lot of legions and parts of legions to suppress the Jewish revolt, 70 AD, the Roman army is breaking through the walls of Jerusalem, through the walls of the temple. The city was conquered, and now the 10th Legion, commanded by Flavius Silva, is stationed in Jerusalem. 2.5 years later, for some reason which is not totally clear, the Roman army decides to engage in another big operation, and this is to go and conquer Masada. Why they would do that, it's not very clear. Masada would not presented any threat by then. Masada was an isolated area, and there was no reason for Rome to invest that many people unless for one thing and one thing only. It was part of the psychological warfare. For the Romans, that was delivering a message. No nation rebelled against Rome more than the Jews, and no nation caused more problem than the Jews. And to use the momentum of the destruction of Jerusalem, the mindset was no doubt, we're going to uproot that rebellious spirit from among you for good. And regardless how far you go and how high you climb and how well you fortify yourselves, nothing will stop us from totally destroying this spirit of the zealots. And Flavius Silva is leading 20,000 Romans, auxiliary and slaves as well, down to Masada to conquer the area. By the way, although Masada was conquered by the Romans, it did not uproot this rebellious spirit from among the Jews. Only 70 years later, under Bar Kokhba, another major revolt broke out, but this is a different story that I'm not going to touch on. So that's what brought the Roman army down to Masada, and the challenges are obvious. We speak about a desert, right? Well, the nearest water reservoir is about 10 miles up north to Engedi, so 7,000 people had to go every day to Engedi just to bring water. Storming the top was impossible, but there was a way to build a ram and to build a war machine and to carry the war machine to breach the wall, and that's how to conquer Masada. If you think about the zealots up in Masada, there wasn't much they could do. They knew what the breaching point is going to be because they saw the ram, and the ram was advancing at a certain part of the wall, and the only thing they could do was basically to build another wall behind the future breaching point, dig a tunnel between the two, or a canal, or a ditch, and just wait until the Romans will be ready. And the Romans were ready. After 4 to 5 months of working in the desert, the Roman army is ready. And the final assault came in Passover of 73. That was late March, early April. I do want to show you what did the zealots add in Masada. They took one of the rooms in the wall, enlarged it a little bit, added those benches and those columns. It was roofed somehow. And that became to be the synagogue. That was not just a place of teaching Torah and worship, that was a place of public gatherings as well. Whenever there is a major issue to deal with, the whole congregation will get together in the synagogue, and for the zealots, that will be the main gathering place. There's a small room here that was called the Geniza. Geniza is a place that you're storing scrolls which are out of use. You not just get rid of them. The word of God is written there. It was done in a certain way. You store them. And they found 14 fragments of scrolls. The most important one is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, the vision of dry bones. And these scrolls were found in 3 languages, in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek. You can call them Dead Sea Scrolls because they would qualify to be part of what was found in Qumran a few years ago. So these are also should be part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. 20 oil lamps also. So that will be the place where the drama took place. That will be the place for the zealots to make that final decision. What are they going to do? Let's have a look at the Roman camp and the Roman bases. And you do see down below here, this is right under the cable car. It was reconstructed partially. This was one of the smallest ones, 8 camps altogether. You do see another one that was not reconstructed. You do see quite in a good condition, even without being reconstructed. And that will be the main one. This is on the western side, very close to the ram. And you do see this designated area. That was Silva's headquarters. From that vantage point, you can really command the battle and you see what goes on right above you. This picture is not that clear to see, but if you see this one, it's a piece of wood, piece of timber. So is this one. And this is just to show you how the siege ramp used to look like. In order to build that ramp, all man-made, what the Romans did basically is building those big structures made of timber, big rectangular structures, to place them one next to the other, one above the other, and fill them with dirt to create a level slope so they can push the war machine, the mobile tower, all the way to the top. And in some places, you can still see those pieces of wood sticking out from the man-made ramp. So this will be the assault ramp. There was nothing here. That will be ground level before the Roman army started building its assault ramp. So that's how the place used to look like. And let's bring the story to conclusion. I would like to do that by bringing up another part or another video here, see if that can work. So just please bear with me for a second. That's how we're supposed to do that. And I hope that the technology will work well so you can basically enjoy or learn about the last days of, the last day, not days, of Masada. So just a minute, please, and let's make it work.
Well, this is where the drama took place. We are seated now in the synagogue. It wasn't built when Masada was built by Herod. There was no need for a synagogue for the Roman king or the Roman garrison here, and therefore that was added by the zealots. We are in a room in the wall. They added the benches, as you can tell. They added the columns as well. They were plastered. Some of the plaster is new, by the way, but you do see the line of reconstruction. This place was designed to accommodate the men of Masada. Out of 960 men, women, children, maybe about 150 were people that used to come to the synagogue for the routines, and there was another reason. That's when the big decisions were made in the life of the community. Well, after 6 months of the siege or something like that, the Roman army is ready. The locals have to make a decision what is it that they're going to do. And the only choices were either to surrender or to fight the Romans, or maybe there was another option. Elazar is gathering the men right here and presents the question. The Romans are at the gates of Masada. The story is about to be over, and they decide to take their own lives. You need to know the zealots understand that kind of principle, and the deal is very simple. We're going to end this life as free people. Our women will not be slaves to the Romans, and our children will not go in slavery, but as free people. And the only way to do that was to take our own lives. And the story that the Jews committed suicide, that's not a story. Jews don't commit suicide. God gave you life. He'll take it when he pleases. You do not take your own life, and even today. When Jews commit suicide, some people do. You bury them outside the walls of the cemetery. Which means that people did not kill themselves, people killed one another. Everything had to be done by a certain protocol. So after the decision was made, the men are going back to their homes, which means the walls, and they kill the family. It's not a pleasant story to tell or to hear. The mothers first, Josephus Flavius tells us, so the mothers will not witness the death of the children. And when the children were killed, and all the men get together to the synagogue. Think about the mindset, and the Romans are breaching the walls of Masada and the Dani shore. And therefore they cast lots. They take a jar made of clay, write names on it, smash it down to the ground, picking 10 pieces. These pieces were found with names on them, like the name of Elazar, son of Yair, the commander. And these 10 were chosen to kill all the others. And then one was selected to kill the other 9, and the last one had to follow his sword. But before he did that, he's running around the mountaintop and he sets everything on fire, not touching the storms. The message had to be clear. We have plenty of food, plenty of water. We choose to end our lives not to be slaves to the Roman Empire. That was our choice. And the following morning, the Roman army is storming through the breached walls into Masada, and all they see is dead bodies, flames of fire. End of story. The question should be now, why do we make Masada such a symbol? Why not choose any other symbol in this country? The reason is simple. Masada focuses on the national freedom. Masada focuses on the national redemption and not on the religious one necessarily. And for the founding fathers of the states and our generation as well, that focus on the national, Masada serves an excellent purpose. Freedom or death. And for that reason, the slogan, Masada shall never fall again, is the one that represents us, and that's how we want the world to know us as well. We're not a religious nation. Not everybody practices the Jewish faith to the details, but we all know why we're here. We're here because God keeps his promises, and the Bible is full of them. So for my generation and myself, to be able to say that I live in a time that God chose to keep his promise to his people in my daytime, it's awesome. I do not take it for granted. That's what Masada stands for. And to make it more meaningful, there was a little room right over that direction. In the excavation, they found pieces of scrolls, if you want to call them Dead Sea Scrolls. The largest one from the whole Bible is Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel 37 is the vision of dry bones. It speaks about the valley full of bones that the prophet Ezekiel is sent to by God. And God orders Ezekiel to prophesy for the dead bones, and the whole army is standing up, coming back to life. Folks, that's the story of the Jewish people. 3 years passed between the ashes of Auschwitz and Jewish independence. There is no such story in world history. So to find on the national side for the whole Bible That section that speaks about the national resurrection, well, we believe it's not a coincidence. We believe it was something divine orchestrated here to find that piece of scripture in what is today our national site. It's not a holy place, but it would be in many senses for Israelis today. So Masada is not just the beauty of the desert, it's not just the history behind it. Masada is a symbol. We say never again, speaking about the Holocaust. We say Masada should never fall again. Combine the two together, and you get a good understanding what this country believes in and how Masada represents that kind of national zeal.
Okay, folks, that was my final moving speech, and I hope that you got the message by now. So it's not indeed just what you see over there. It's not just the desert and the story behind you. It is a symbol, first of all, and above all, and a very important one to my generation. Not easy to carry on that kind of passion to the next generation, do the best we can. So Masada serves a very important purpose here. Let's just bring that to conclusion, if I may. Yeah, well, I think that we covered almost everything here already, giving you the details about what happened in Masada in its final month, weeks, days, and hours. And as I told you earlier, we know the story, although everybody was indeed killed. They found about 60 skeletons in a cave on the southern cliff, but these are people who died out of natural causes. Masada was reused centuries later by the first Christian hermits who lived in the desert. They built a small monastery on the top, using, no doubt, some of the water facilities of the old Masada. But Masada, as a Jewish stronghold, as a Roman stronghold occupied by Jews, had a very short history, only 7 years, but a very meaningful one as well. Well, this will be it for now. I hope that you were blessed by the information. Maybe you learned something new, although you've been to Masada, no doubt. If you've been to Israel, good chance that you've been to Masada as well. So I hope that that was beneficial for you. Be safe, and if you need to practice social distancing and wear masks, whatever it takes to keep your health and your condition as good as possible, please do. And we're going to meet next time, and we're going to go to Beersheba, and this is another fascinating site. Until then, may the God of Israel richly bless you all.